If you're a business owner or senior manager, you probably had more than enough about all the wonderful opportunities awaiting you in the era of digitalization.
Whether it is big data, cloud, data science, or whatever buzzword is currently trendy.
If you would like to hear someone dissecting these claims and showing you what it actually takes to improve business processes, you're in the right place.
This is Between Data and Risk, where we discuss real-life examples of what works and what doesn't in the world of business operations. Hello, I'm Artur and with me is my co-host, your neighborhood-friendly data guy, Dr. Marian.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome to this first episode of Between Data and Risk. Today, we'll be talking about data, and we'll be talking about how listening to your data can really bring you closer to reality. Marian, I know that this is something that you've encountered quite intimately in your life. So why don't you tell us about something that we really love talking about, your first peer-reviewed, published COVID data spread model?
Yes, it's a pretty good story. I think it's a really good example of how looking at the data itself and, as you said, listening to it can bring you to conclusions which are closer to reality. For those who are with us and don't know, my model differed from others. It was a global spread model, meaning that we take one ill person, we drop it in Wuhan, China, in November 2018, and the model calculates how many ill people will be in different areas of the world. The world is divided into small chunks around airports, and in each chunk we were able to calculate how many people will be sick and how many of them will be symptomatic, how many of them will be asymptomatic, to the level where, starting the simulation with single person in Wuhan, China, in November 2019, we were able to accurately predict number of people that will be symptomatic and asymptomatic in New York 6 months later. There was an excellent research done by one of the hospitals where they tested a sample of pregnant women, which is an excellent random sample. All women are giving birth at some point when they are pregnant, of course. So there was no social or racial or any other type of disturbance. So it was, and our predictions were pretty accurate. But how did we get there? Let me remind you that
let's first point out when you actually did it, because I think this is a key bit of information.
Thank you, Artur. Yes, we did it in March 2020, so it was 3 months after, or 5 months after the whole thing started, and it was very soon after it was spread. The information, not only COVID, but the information was spread. So it's a model which was prepared way ahead of any reaction of the world, to be honest, to the virus. So it was done pretty quickly. But coming back to data, I love talking about data. I don't like talking about dates, especially the failed ones. Our model differed from other attempts in a number of, I would say, facets. One of them was it wasn't a machine learning model. We didn't just drop data into some machine learning machinery. It was an analytical model, and maybe that was the biggest source of its success, and that's why we were able to predict reality correctly, because the data from different countries differ very much. And the virus, which was spreading like a wildfire in one country, suddenly in another was mildly, slowly, lazily crossing from one side of the street to another, getting hit by a Mack truck half of the time. So
was it the quality of the data that differed, or was it actually the data was telling you something different?
It was the quality of the data. Data was telling me that in many cases, the virus is treated as a political entity, not the biological one. So we had to take a step back, get back to the board, and draw ourselves the information. What we know about the viruses? What do we know about the coronaviruses? What do we know about outbreaks of similar similar viruses in the past? And we realized that this outbreak, if we would believe the original source of data, it would be one of the slowest spreading coronaviruses, and yet it would, become a pandemic. Slowly, it was visible that it becomes a pandemic. These two didn't really add up very well. So we checked the faster spreading coronaviruses and fed it to the model. And if we sped up the virus we didn't have much data from many countries. Like, it was just spreading to go out. So the data from countries with which we considered trustworthy was still limited. But there were, let's say, enough cases. We used some advanced statistics to see what is the confidence interval of our predictions. They were pretty wide, but not so wide, but the model was useless. Maybe a bit wider, but we would like to. But still, we were comparing the results of our analytical model with the observed reality.
So the first lesson kind of that I would draw out here is to actually look at your data and compare it to known examples, so that you actually can take, even to have a feel whether your data is actually whether you're reading it correctly.
I would phrase it different. I think I agree, but the first thing that you should do working with any data, and it's not only about COVID. It's I will give you another example. We had a situation where, working for one of the companies, they had a system which was messaging people, and they were observing. They were interested in people opening these messages. I think everybody who worked in marketing knows that it's pretty relevant if people actually read what you prepared for them. So they were sending these messages, and I've been tasked with checking what is the effectiveness, the overall effectiveness of this messaging. And they realized that nobody checked what is an open ratio of the messages that we expect people to open. I asked them, and they provided me with some initial analysis of these open ratios. But I noticed in the file that some of these open ratios are larger than 1. My question was, how is it even possible that you have open ratios which are bigger than 1? And the answer was, it's fewer than 5% of cases, so we disregard it. The problem was much deeper, and there was an actual problem with the logging system. The data was unreliable, and it was a really big technological problem in the end. But so the first step, think what the data means. It's not exactly like rocket surgery. It's about it's your data about your business. What does it really mean? If I have an open ratio, it means that 10 people received messages, well, 10 messages each, and on average, how many messages did they open? And if somebody opens more messages than they received, there is something like, if you would send people like paper envelopes, and you would hear that somebody opened 12 envelopes out of 10 that they received, it should raise some suspicion something is wrong.
It clearly indicates problems, but what about slightly more subtle issues? Like how can you really verify that the data is reliable? Let's say you never had open ratios above 50%. How could you tell whether this is really, reliable data?
If you can do it, you should send one more message to a control person and see if all the gates this message goes through report it going through. The best way to test the data is to make a, so to speak, control run of the process that you are trying to measure and see if everything is reflected correctly.
So how would you do it for COVID? Because you cannot, put a pregnant woman in New York and see if she catches COVID, right?
In this case, we do not have control over the process, of course. What you can do is you can compare what you said, compare the structure of the data that you are researching with the structure of the data that you have some information about. That's second best thing to actually running the process. In business, you should have control over most of the processes in your company, unless you are, I don't know, building a ship or a plane, and you don't want to, do some serious, stress testing on it, just to check if your databases log it correctly.
Well, you probably should in that case. If you're building a plane, you should stress test it to distraction. Yeah.
Yes, but you know what I mean. It's probably stress testing is controlled and is driven by requirements of the stress testing, not doing it for the sake of checking if your new database version still connects with your old, ERP system and whatnot. It's okay. We tried to be funny. We failed. We're so sorry. Let's get back to the story. So the first thing is, if you can do the test run of your data, understand, okay, what this point of data in my database means. Database in a file, in the email, on your chalkboard, whatever. I'm trying to be as agnostic when it comes to data storage and technologies. I am not a big fan of any technologies.
I think a big problem with the data that was used for COVID was you already mentioned one problem is that it was treated as a political entity, not a biological one. But another problem was that a lot of the analysis was polluted by preconceptions, by confirmation biases. How did you avoid going down that path? Because there were a lot of assumptions fed into the models that were being developed. And you mentioned yourself, look at past examples, but past examples could be already feeding some assumptions into your analysis.
That's why the best method is to do a test run. I think the biggest problem of the models which were being prepared, it was over reliance on machine learning. Really, when we are talking about assumptions coming from the experience, there are statistical methods which allow us to, let's say, assume what is an example required sample size to detect given effect size. And they require assuming what will be the expected effect size. You need a different sample to test if you're open. Let's get back to open ratios, of message open ratios. If you want to test two, titles of your emails, and you need to have different sample size if your expected open ratio is 1%, and you can have different sample size if your expected open ratio is 50%. So unfortunately, you cannot do any analysis when it comes to data with disconnection to any prior knowledge. There are things that people already learned, and data science is about extracting like this prejudice or unfounded assumptions that you mentioned. They weren't connected to the nature of the virus. They were connected to over reliance on machine learning. People should think, if they would think about, okay, what do we know about the previous coronavirus spreads, instead of blindly feeding data to. Also, most of the models that I've seen by that time were on the country level at best, and there were multiple, and they were inherently in disagreement with each other. Why do you believe that suddenly your data is the only true in the world? Some of them probably were, but it's an assumption which broke with every coming week when all the models were only good to describe what's happening right now, and a week later, suddenly it didn't work anymore. So
your model was global in reach. Why did you decide to model globally rather than constrain yourself to a single country or a group of countries?
To answer this question, we should come back to the origin of the story. It all started as a joke. It's not like we were virologists trying to justify our wages by modeling it. We were discussing what would happen if someone would sell pregnancy tests as COVID tests. Probably we will come back to the topic of specificity and sensitivity and evaluating any machine learning models at some point. But let's say we tried to, just for fun, just for intellectual fun, to decide if someone would sell pregnancy tests as COVID tests, what would he have to claim on the package to be legally or actually right? So what sensitivity and specificity they would have to, let's say accuracy, they would have to claim to be correct. So
it probably wouldn't be legally right, but let's say mathematically right.
I don't know, to be honest. We should actually. It gave me an idea, Artur. We should once invite a lawyer who would tell us what level of manipulating the truth around data is actually legal. Because I honestly don't know if it would be legal or not.
Yeah, it's a good idea for one of the future episodes. But obviously, what immediately springs to mind is Ben Goldacre, if I remember the name correctly, and the book Bad Medicine. Again, if I remember the title correctly, which describes a lot of these kind of cases where medicine is applied, the science is applied, or was the book called Bad Science? I don't remember. Anyway, but exactly what you say. If you claim your specificity and accuracy wide enough, you are probably going to be mathematically right.
Yes, if you. So the question is, what is current actual level of or ratio of people who are asymptomatically? We knew from the data that we already had that there is a lot of asymptomatic cases, and the question was what is the actual level of with asymptomatic cases to still be, to compare it to just giving everybody a minus. So it was a question that we wanted to answer, and we realized that nobody actually does it. We couldn't find a model that would answer this question. So we decided again, okay, so let's quickly do it ourselves. We had a couple of smart people in the room, and we found it fascinating to just solve it just for fun. So we didn't have any pressure on us. For us, it was intellectual exercise. For us, it was just good fun. So we didn't have to feel anybody's obligations to do things the certain way. We wanted to know what is the actual answer. Which leads me to another step. If you want to work with the data, ensure yourself certain level of freedom.
Objectivity.
Freedom. Objectivity comes from the freedom. If you are pressured to provide some answer, I can assure you that most of the data people can provide some answer. They can even justify it, and it might be even mathematically correct, like this pregnancy test. But putting such a pressure on your data scientist is asking for getting certified pregnancy tests as COVID tests. By the way, I know some research institutes are still running projects on detecting COVID. Some research projects, they took a year or more than a year to actually grant the money for researching the tests. It started when nobody had tests, and I still know of several research projects still running that try to develop novel methods to detect COVID. That's again the difference between trying to get the answer because you want to know the truth and feeling, checking the boxes and filling out the needs which are not connected to your result. So let's try to stay a bit on track. I know I'm really bad at it. So we have the freedom, we have the reason, we look at the data, and coming back to these preconceptions, I wouldn't call the prior knowledge a preconception. There is a bit of difference between zero and null. I believe if you look at the data without pressure, it also increases the chances that you will be free of preconceptions. You will not expect results. And then you can treat the prior knowledge as a prior knowledge. to answer your question, because you said how did you free yourself from preconceptions? We didn't expect anything from it, maybe except getting the correct model for the sake of getting this model, not to justify anything, or it was pressure free.
So this kind of comes, very close to another topic which we'll probably be tackling in one of future episodes. The problem with all modern science, when you get a grant for your research and then you're expected to produce results, so you don't have the freedom to just say, we looked at it, we had a really good look at it, and sorry, we didn't find anything. Because then you will not get another grant if you do that.
Yes, absolutely, and this is a terrible thing which is happening to the research. It's not only that you need to get some result, you need to get breakthrough result. I think you're understating the problem, because right now to publish, let's say, in a place where anything will be noticed, you need to have a ground-breaking results. So everybody is pumping up the trying to use statistical significance as a measure of actual significance, and saying that and adding layers and layers of potential consequences of a discovery just to make it importanter.
And I think it would be a very, very good topic for a future episodes to discuss statistical significance, actual significance, and confidence intervals. But I wanted to bring your story a bit closer to business, because you mentioned about not treating the virus as a political entity, and kind of about the expectation to get a result, or maybe to put it a different way, there were a lot of probably factors that made people achieve results that they were expected to achieve, to reach conclusions that they were expected to reach. Now, I want to give you a story from business that is strangely similar. Stress testing. Obviously, we're in financial markets where my history lies. A lot of my professional life has been spent in financial services. There's a lot of stress testing exercises where we take the financial portfolios and we run scenarios on them. What would happen? How much would the institution lose or make, as the case may be, if these particular set of circumstances played out over X amount of time? And having actually gone through and designed a lot of these processes to do the stress testing, I worked mostly on equity tests, and I designed the systems. But I had a very distinct.
If you would explain to me, like, equity, what do you mean? I worked with equity.
Mostly shares of companies that are exchange traded, and products, financial products that are based on the value of those shares.
Okay.
I've gone through the UK financial regulator expects the banks under its remit to do stress testing on regulatory mandated scenarios. The US regulator, Hong Kong regulator, European Central Bank expects its banks to do stress testing. Every time I've gone through this, I've had almost a directive from senior management to achieve a certain result, right? So pretty much you can always go through, you would always go through stress testing this way. You get the requirement to run a stress test, you then get a scenario, and before you even look at the scenario, you get maybe not spoken, not written, but a kind of a directive, a suggestion. This is how much the bank needs to achieve in the result. Either not normally a loss, but the loss needs to be significant enough as to show that we've treated the stress test seriously. It cannot be big enough to cause alarm, right? It cannot be a gain, because then it would look strange. It has to be a loss. The loss cannot be small enough, because then you're not doing your job really. But it cannot be big enough, because that would cause red flags and questions. So how can you maintain intellectual integrity when you're almost told up front before you do your research, your modeling, this is what we want the result to be?
No, it's the question of the I would say this the domain knowledge, which we spoke about actual meaning of the data, but we mentioned in form of the joke about the goal of the exercise. The exercise that you were running, you could just write them the number.
Then you have to justify it, right?
So your job is to find the circumstances, I guess, which would produce big enough. And can I be blunt? It's a manipulation. I know you expected some word that we would have to beep here, and I wanted to use one, but I decided against it because I would have to beep it myself, and it's too much work. Anyway, it's not a research. It's let's say a calculation which is aimed. The goal is to satisfy. I'm a bit surprised.
The powers that be,
yeah. I'm a bit surprised that they didn't want to run actual tests just for themselves, and the second set to justify, because that's what I would do if I would have desire to just fulfill the tics of somebody else's and pressure from outside. I would be curious myself, like, okay, if the things go really, 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 really bad, how badly will I be hit? But that's my curiosity.
I think there's a lot, and probably especially in case of stress testing. I will be slammed for that in the comments, and we will be contacted by someone. But I will say that because of that's my intellectual integrity requires it. There's a lot of kind of living in denial, I think, in financial services. That you don't really want to know, and even after 2008, you don't really want to know how big the problem is. You want to be comfortable. You want to demonstrate to yourself that the problem is really not that big, and that your risk is within certain parameters that are easily understandable. And probably that's why. Certain scenarios are run the way they are. It's an interesting problem.
It reminds me, it's not just business, and you are talking about people who are under pressure of controlling billions and billions of dollars, under heavy scrutiny of regulators and stuff. I guess this pressure can create the need. People have the need to be sure, and they want to see things in a certain way. There are psychological mechanisms. Again, idea for a future episode to invite the psychologist to talk about psychology of statistics, not statistics of psychology, but the psychology of statistics. There is a whole field where psychologists explain why certain statistics are used the way it is, despite not being scientifically maybe applicable to the problem. But the case, big bank, important CEO, a lot of money, little research institute, a researcher doing very important work on which may not result in catastrophic failure if something goes wrong. One of the best statisticians I know was asked to help a researcher in deciding what is the actual effect size of the research. that was being performed. What happened? She received the results and said, but you have only 3 repetitions of this exercise here, of this experiment. It won't be really very reliable. She had, we run 7, but we know that the 3 are required to publish stuff. So we took the 3 which are the most aligned with what we expect, and we disregarded other 4. And now you use statistics to show what is the significance of the results that we have.
That's just intellectual integrity gone out of the window, right?
No, actually, the results went out of the window, and the person in question just didn't do any analytics, and instead but refuses to participate in such shenanigans, and it just won't be done this way. But I've heard a rumor, and probably again we will be contacted by someone. Again, please treat them as a rumor. I have absolutely no reason to believe that these are more than a rumor. However, from the intellectual perspective, it would be interesting thing to do. Some of the big pharma companies, when they are doing, it is being said that some big pharma companies, when they are doing the actual tests of field tests of the medicines that they produce, they run it multiple times. And even if you have pretty stringent constraints on testing, if you can afford it, what you can do, you can run really big tests multiple times. And one of them, you may succeed to select a group of people who will react to the medicine the way you expect. If you already spent $1 billion or $2 billion, euros, or pounds on developing a medicine, spending extra 100 million or 200 million or repeating really big tests 5, 6, 7, 10 times, it makes a business it's a business viable solution. So I must say that it might be just foil hats trying to spread bad mouth big pharma. However, looking at the opioid crisis in the States, I believe there might exist at least one company, pharmaceutical company, willing to do questionable practices to increase their profit.
Obviously, we're not pointing out to anyone. And,
no, absolutely. I worked for some big pharma companies, and they were guys genuinely interested in the well-being of the patients. And I must say that everybody that I spoke there, from IT teams to researchers, their main goal was to make good medicine. And I was really, maybe not, I don't want to use the word surprised, but the level of integrity was astonishing. It was, they wanted to do the right thing and to be sure and understand it was pretty interesting working there, because we really wanted to understand why the things work. They weren't satisfied with just getting things that are working. They wanted to understand it, why it works, what might be the side effects, how it can be used in the future. The scientific, intellectual, and moral integrity of these people was absolutely astonishing. And then hearing all this foil hat theories about all big pharma just being lizard men trying to experiment with people who are...
Yeah, let's not go there. So it actually...
Shall we try to steer...
Yeah, I just wanted to steer the conversation a bit back, because you mentioned something. We've obviously spoke. We spoke about the intellectual freedom and really wanting to get to the bottom of things, to the reality of things. But now you mentioned about traceability as well, and this ties very nicely to what you said in the beginning about your model being an analytical model, not machine learning, because the big problem with a lot of machine learning models is that there are black boxes. You throw in some data, some conclusions come out, or not even conclusions, some model comes out, which then you can feed with new data, so it does some predictions. But then you cannot crack this box open. You cannot really answer why certain things happen. So
I don't agree. At this point, I don't agree. There is more and more research done on so-called explainable models. There are methods of feeding the models or creating the models with avoidance of certain parameters or variables and subsets of variables. The explainability of the models is increasing. If somebody wants to do it, if somebody wants to understand what is behind it.
But these are, as you say, there's research, right? In practice, the ones that we see in the wild, so to speak, when we encounter businesses, they still work with the models where you throw in some data, a neural network or something is calibrated, is taught, and then you do predictions. And a prediction comes out, and the only thing you can say is because we fed it this data. And traceability is very important. So your model was traceable because it was analytic. A lot of the modeling that I've done in financial services was traceable because we could actually do analysis on the model, and that also directs you not only to why there are certain results coming out, but it allows you to look at the boundaries and look at the limitations where the model actually breaks down. Because any model, it's a map, and it has boundaries. You have to know where your model will actually start giving you rubbish, unreliable information, unreliable predictions, because you've reached the end of the envelope.
That is true, and this is something that we try to do in Cognition for years, is to make our clients aware with them. We started as a pure data science company, and we were producing models for people, and always we were trying to identify in what circumstances these models will stop working. I think one of the actually, you should tell me. One of the reasons why 2008 had such a terrible impact was that people were using models and all these instruments, which were assuming some continuity of events, like prices of properties rising, and without thinking when the models that we build will break. What is the change in assumptions that will break the model?
We'll probably again in future episodes go into 2008 and dissect it into very small pieces. But if I had to point out that a single significant assumption, mathematical assumption that was that led directly to 2008, it was the assumption of independence of the distributions going into the Gaussian cupola. That was used to price CDOs.
We will need a separate.
Yeah, but if you watch, if you watch The Big Short, you will get a very good example. With celebrity actors on how it actually worked out. But it was an assumption, a mathematical assumption that got us into it. And the misuse of that mathematical assumption. So yes, it is. It was a model which was devised for certain purposes, and then it was taken to its illogical conclusion and used on a grand scale, essentially to make money. And yeah, the rest is history.
Again, we will speak about in detail in the future, but the same principle works with, I think, most of the science which is being done. I think even more money was wasted thanks to as a single assumption, which is very often overlooked, which is when you calculate p-value, you assume that the two sets are identical. Hypothesis zero is they are identical, they never are. So this is a little assumption which was omittable when the samples were small. So at this level, let's say this assumption could be omitted because they were the difference could be so small but irrelevant. But now we got into high throughput methods, whole genomes, whole proteomes, whole populations being tested, and suddenly this long forgotten assumption came out and wasted a lot of money. But let's get back to the COVID model. So let's try to line it up again. You have people who have some, I would say, freedom to operate. They get the data where they think about its meaning. Actually, this is maybe a good time to mention that we will talk about it in the future, because to learn the actual meaning of the data, it's not enough to be a good data scientist. It's not about to be a good data guy. The data comes from different sources. Let's focus on business. You need to work with business people, and lack of cooperation between business and research and data scientists is a terrible thing. We actually, with a couple of colleagues, wrote a book, Data Mesh in Action, where data mesh is a solution aimed to bring decentralized analytics and decentralize the responsibility for analytics and put it in the hands of the business domains. So the people who are actually doing business are supposed to work with people who are doing actual analytics to produce some results. And this is critical. I will be coming back to that often, not only to promote my book, but also to make sure that people understand. If you are a data scientist, you need to talk to business people. They are also smart people. They may not spend as many years learning about machine learning as you did, but they do actual job that brings actual results, and it means that they know something, hopefully. And if you are a business person, talk to your data scientists. They may be a bit geeky. They may not be as excellent in communication and preparing, colorful PowerPoints. But despite their geekiness, they might understand how to process the data that you know in a way that will give you a meaningful model. But they won't do it if you won't tell them what this data really means. They will do their best, but if they won't understand what really is behind this data, they are likely, unfortunately, to feed you the predictions which are based on the wrong assumptions. We spent last couple of minutes talking about the dangers of the wrong assumptions. So assumptions about data are really, really dangerous in business. So then we come to the tools, because our model, it was analytical, so it was just a couple of numbers, like the ratio of or the spread of the virus should be this such and such. But we needed tools to test this model against the reality. We used third-party tool. We didn't write our own. It was a tool used to model the spread of, I think, the bird flu. It's free to use and done by amazing researchers. Not very popular, but absolutely amazing. As I said, it divides the world into little pieces around international airports, and that uses the data about the connections, actual physical data about the flight connections, to predict how the disease will spread all over the world. We used it. It looked like it's close enough to to reality, but it's worth at least discussing. And this is another issue that I wanted to raise here. But let's stop at the technologies. Again, technology is. I remember one discussion I had when somebody wanted to hire our company, and they said, "Okay, but what are the technologies that you're really like excited about?" I said, "I'm sorry, I'm too old to be excited about technologies. Technologies come and go; they change. I'm sometimes excited about the new possibilities which some technologies can open, but technologies themselves are nothing. I
They're
am
tools,
excited
right?
they are tools. I'm I use hammer, I use nails. I try not to stick to the hammer because everything will look like a nail. But I have a wide toolbox, and the gentleman was unconvinced. He wanted to work with people who would be like excited because they were planning to implement some new technology. He wanted people who will be like really excited about it. But why did he speak to the guys who are focused on business processes and with strong data science background? I don't know. It's like he should talk to the tech company probably.
We are as
Anyway.
you say, we try to be technology agnostic and look at the data, we look at the processes, we look at the risk. But if someone is getting excited about a specific technology, then they should be looking at developing that technology, not something based on it, because it's a completely different thing.
Yes, that's something which is worth remembering. That technology is just a set of tools. We come to the conclusion where the last thing which is, I think, required for the actual success of the model is people willing to listen to it. Our model was delayed in publishing. It was released and the preprint was released in March. It was published in, if I remember correctly, July. So the number of papers about COVID by then skyrocketed, and it was lost in the crowd. And we were still the only global model back then. It was still the first peer-reviewed global model. It had pretty interesting consequences, which proved right. So I'm not saying that our model was perfect. I'm not saying that it was the only possible way of looking at coronavirus. But what it was giving a bit different outlook at the disease, and it could lead to a bit different reaction of the world if it would be listened to. I don't want to go. If you're interested in the discussion between us and our reviewers, where one of them was released from his duty for obstructionism. It was the first time in my career, and that the reviewer was actively undermining the publication on the political basis. So, but what
there were a lot of pressure, political pressure. So, and that is clear.
The conclusion that I want to reach: if you have your good model, what you need for it to succeed is someone willing to accept the results. And this is, our podcast is aimed to educate and maybe help senior management and business owners. So if you have your data science team, and we spoke about it earlier about testing of stress testing of the systems. If you have a data science team and they come up to you with some result that you don't like, listen to them. They may not be right, but they may not be wrong. This is something which is this is where the most prejudice comes. It's not a prejudice towards the data that was used to feed the model. Is prejudice towards the results which are not aligned with the expectations. So this is
reminds me of another story. If we may kind of wrap up with another story that you actually told me, and this is your story, but let me tell this the way I remember, where you told me you were interviewed once and for a data science job, and you were given this set of data to analyze, and you told one of the bigwigs in the company was present, and you told them, this project, it didn't bring any ROI. It was it's interesting. It was interesting concept, but there is no ROI. So that's the result. And you told me about the shock in their eyes, that all their data scientists told them that the project was big success, and it brought such a return that was astounding. And you just pointed out that there was, if I remember correctly, the data contained natural market shifts, external factors that were completely not accounted for.
And the selection of the sample for there was subset of companies which had like projects implemented and not implemented, but the difference between them was already significant. They didn't randomly choose. So let's say they were bound to ride the wave a bit better than the other guys. Like, if you have higher turnover in some of, let's say, shops, and the whole market grows by a certain percent, their net turnover will grow more than these smaller ones. So the percentage-wise, the growth was identical. It just was, objectively bigger. Yes.
It's a clear example of confirmation bias, but I think it points out very nicely that even in things where you think you know the domain, you think you know ultimately the processes, you still need to be careful, and it's worth taking an external guy to look at the data objectively and tell you what they really think.
And you need to be willing to accept that some of your preconceptions may be outdated. They could be true some time ago, but the world changes. Okay, I think we're running out of time.
Yeah, it's all the time, all that we have time for today. Hopefully, it was of use to someone. Thank you for listening.
If you want to find out more about paradigm shifts, head to the Paradigm Shift podcast hosted by Ashish Kundra and Zain Salim. You'll find there some candid conversations with people building the future, about the breakthrough moments and hard-earned insights that shaped people, products, and technologies.
And for some very educational risk management disaster stories, listen to Dr. Andrew's thoughts in his podcast My Worst Investment Ever, where he interviews investors and financial titans from around the world who share their heartbreaking tales of investment misfortune. As usual, the links to both of these sources will be in the notes to this episode.
Also, don't miss the next one, where we'll be talking to Yuchen Chan, the founder of Redpoint Holdings, entrepreneur and investor, about his experiences in nurturing startups.
Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or visit bdr.show to find out more about future episodes and guests. You can also check out cognition.llc for more information on Cognition shared solutions, our services, and other events hosted by us.
For now, it's thank you from myself, your friendly neighborhood data guy, Dr. Marian Siwiak, and my co-host, Artur Buja.
Thank you.